So we'll call the meeting to order. Michael and Mitch, come on up. You're not gonna suck me into another meeting, are you, if I get close? Hi. You know, Did you take a shower your today? Opinion just mattered so much. Yeah, shower, bad news, I get it all day. Okay, today we're going to try to finalize our voting on the warrant articles, and we had questions that we posed to the library, so we can start with that warrant article. And what I'd like to do is, since it was a very comprehensive document, is just to call the people around the table if they have additional clarification that they would like to hear from you before we have our final deliberations.
Okay. And you did get the.
Well, yes.
I've been anxious about that ever since.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I don't know what went, yeah. Between emails between us, it's technology. It has hiccups sometimes. We don't call them that ourselves, right? But anyway, let's start down. Peter, do you have any questions from materials on the library? No, fine. John?
I know we talked about this last time. If the library has a function, there is no revenue source from that, correct? The library cannot,
By state statute.
by state statute.
Right. What we can do, and Liz, I brought with me, she really knows it, that, so she'll correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is if we had, for example, a craft class and there were materials, we can charge for the materials. But as far as the presenter, if there's a fee for the presenter, the library pays for that. We cannot charge people an entrance fee. Is that correct?
Yes.
And oftentimes, even with those craft classes, like the Friends may kick in the money so that it's totally free for people who participate. Some of them, the materials are construction paper and paint, and the library just provides that. Any other? Liz, did I miss anything?
No.
I have a comment, if I may. I did New Hampshire listens. I just started volunteering for them. We went up to Lewiston, Maine, and did sort of a session helping people. That's where there was a 6 weeks ago mass shooting, 18 people died. And we talked to people. The goal is just to help people process what happened. At my table is the library director, and I thought, so after it was done, I talked to him, and it was interesting because it gave me a different sort of perspective on the library. So one thing that he said is that, because I was interested that we did the New Hampshire Listens event at the library. You could do lots of other places, but his view is that the library is, I guess we talked about it as being a community center, but it's not. It's not just a library of books. From his perspective, and I think it's very interesting when we look at it, it's a community space. And so the point would be, let's say that there was a mass shooting here, something significant that happened here in our school. You wouldn't want to go to the school to have a community discussion, right? You wouldn't have something here, right? And so what the community, what the library does is it fills a gap that exists just naturally in the community. You have governments that do things, you have social services organizations that do things, but there's a gap, right? And as I started to think about this a little bit more, it made me wonder if really when we're looking at the library, we're looking at almost in the wrong way. Because it really should be more than just books. It should be a community space. And I think the problem that we have is that today it's a cramped building filled to the brim with books. And so it sort of makes it hard to envision what it could be. Right. So if you were to expand it, what are those options? And I think that we just need to think about them. For example, you could have, there's a lot more homeschooling going on. I was reading about, these micropods and things of homeschooling. It might be nice even in that case, and we haven't ever discussed it. I've never discussed it with you, but maybe the library could become a place where kids who are homeschooling come together. Maybe there's materials for homeschooling. Maybe there's, a whole nother reason for it to be that we haven't envisioned because it's just what it is today. And it's only once it gets to be big enough that you really begin to understand what all the possibilities are. So that was just my evolution of thinking as a result of that activity.
That example is one that would fit definitely within the scope of the library's responsibilities, which is the education and learning. Because that's what the RSA covers. Now, I have a question about when you have those events and programs. There are many that you list that in other communities are provided by volunteer, non-profit organizations. So, or guilds. So you have a knitters guild and a quilting guild and cooking classes available through some of those possible people. I agree totally that the library can provide for space for those events. So the question I have is, what about the staff time? Or if you're paying for someone to give that content, who is that included in our budget that taxpayers are expected to give?
Do you want to go there or shall I?
Well, why don't you start? I want to make sure I understand. That you're asking, it's making the space available to like a nonprofit organization
Or anyone?
or anyone.
You're having these programs
Right.
for, cooking, music and meditation and yoga and gardening. I mean, there are other sources for people that provide that material. Or now, why would you contract? Is a taxpayer paying for a gardener, master gardener, to come in and give a class on how to take care of dahlias or vegetables and things like that? If the taxpayers are paying for that, I would say that that's beyond the scope of the library of providing space for a meeting space, which is very important for the community. So that's why I was asking. You have part-time people that are there. Now, the people that would have to monitor the entry and making sure that it's secure and it's an environment for that situation, I agree, would be necessary. But to actually provide the programming, provide the scheduling, to do a lot of other things for those events, I would wonder whether that really fits within the scope of the RSA.
I guess the library is really almost a part of the education system. It's lifelong learning. So having programs, educational programs in the library is not an expansion of the scope of the library. It's an integral component of what libraries do. If we were to have an event, or I guess I should say an additional way a library can, if you want to say make money, is you can rent out your meeting space. And some libraries that have large meeting space actually do that. Whether it's, we visited the Peterborough Library, a new large expansion of the existing town library there. And they built in addition to sort of program rooms, classroom, they have a very large meeting room that they actually do rent out. It's available, obviously, for their own programs. But I think the first year, Liz, because we toured it together, maybe the first year they were open, they cleared like $5,000 renting out that space. The second year, I think they were budgeting to receive $10,000. So that's substantial money, but it's a space that costs a lot to build. It has all the built-in technology and it's very large. So, but that's a way that if somebody were providing a program for which they needed space that they would otherwise have to rent, that is a way for the library to make a little money. But as far as the programs, I guess I'm going to challenge that it's not mission creep. And there are, if we had a request for, I think what kind of programs you've been doing that involve paying a speaker, like the Felton class.
Yes, that was requested by, we've been lucky because we have a certified yoga instructor on staff. So she's been doing it for free for us. Other people we pay, like New Hampshire Humanities, actually that money, we pay them, but that's from a grant through New Hampshire Humanities. We write out the grant. They actually give us the cost of the entire speaker, and then frequently they will charge us mileage, which is covered by the Friends most of the time. Friends give us a lot of donations to cover, yeah, like some of, the materials for a craft class, stuff of that nature. What else have we had to pay? The Barrington Bloomers came to us because they want to utilize our spot, and they're willing to pick up the majority of the cost of the program. It's good for them. They get more members, they get to use the library space, they get to encourage other people. It's sort of, Susan's right, it's more of a lifelong learning sort of endeavor that we are engaging in. I think who else we paid? We did pay the Project Coyote woman.
Yeah, I have a question about that. That is not going and teaching people how to move illegal aliens into the country.
No. No,
Yeah, stories.
it was becoming wolf, and how the coyotes are actually not just coyotes anymore. They're evolving as they're coming into our communities.
Animal programs are always really
Oh my
popular.
goodness, yes.
And I guess I'll clarify, we don't do cooking classes. The
No,
closest thing we have is the Spice Club. But we don't have cooking facilities, and we're not
No.
building those into the new library either. The new library, like the old library, will have a refrigerator, microwave, but we're not going to be able to, and not,
no.
it actually involves other building codes and stuff like that when you get into that sort of thing, so.
If I recall, at one point, the Democrat committee used to hold meetings, and
Yeah.
do they still?
We don't see them anymore.
But
COVID
that's
changed
just any
everything.
community group
Yeah.
can book that meeting room. And we have meeting room policies about the request process and that sort of. So I'm not sure we're really directly responding. Maybe we're challenging your understanding.
No, it's you're clarifying.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. There is very little place here that you can get reasonable cost adult education. And the library provides many of those services.
Well, and then I know that that's when I have people that really need to get GEDs or whatever they call it these days and so on. That's adult education.
Well, that's true, but I'm talking about the trip to Burma.
That was interesting.
Yeah, the trip through Burma. They bring in the owl people come in, raptor people. That's education that adults have. It doesn't really do a degree, making life much better for adults in this community. The rec department's having the same problem. They're not much adult education, much adult entertainment. And I think the rec department's moving that way. The library moves that part. It's a very important part of the education process. You don't get a degree, you don't get credit for a degree. You just get additional knowledge. That's education. And I think that's what it is.
Providing the opportunity for that is part of space availability, but actually funding, the scheduling and everything else of those events is what I was questioning. So there's a difference in my mind between those things, because who is benefiting from that? Is it a general community benefit? Or is it something that that it gives an individual kind of thing, like meditation, some of these other things?
I think some of the things, and one thing that I'm involved with the VNA, so I know a little bit about their services. And they have been working with a number of libraries in the area on caregiver support. They have, and what they have done is they don't charge anything. They offer their staff. The library becomes the space where caregivers, and these are people who are taking care of a husband with Alzheimer's disease, for example, someone who's seriously chronically ill. So obviously we want to support the caregivers so that people can remain at home. And I think they've done them in Stratford. Dover now has one, Farmington, they had one in Newington. And they started up, and over time, what happens is they help develop a volunteer coordinator or supporter. And then that's another resource in that community for truly unmet unserved population in the community, the library becomes the place where that happens. As far as scheduling, meeting room, these things generally take place during the normal open hours of the library, so staff is there anyway. It's not like we add staff in order to make
Well,
it
that's,
happen.
that's making available space.
Correct.
That I have no issue
But
with.
it comes through the library, it's promoted, it's a resource that the library is able to be available in the community because the library exists.
And Stephen, you were asking to the extent possible that they adopt sort of a recreation center model where possible.
That's an analogy to where I'm trying to go, is who benefits and therefore is it the town's responsibility and the general taxpayer's responsibility to provide it? I agree, I don't have any problem with space.
Right.
We need meeting space for the town, period.
But if the arts and crafts and things were self-funded, that would.
Well, yeah, that's where, but I don't know how you get there. Now, I think you could. But,
When I look at the overall budget for the library, that I don't have a problem with the requested increases of 2.95% is reasonable.
That's all wages and benefits.
there was one big decrease that contributed to the reduction in percentage, so. You really do analysis of the budget, that's the way they got to that.
But I think our point is even if there weren't like the snow removal, the overall budget is really, it's really the wages and benefits. We really didn't have anything else wise. One of the things I did, and I went back and I looked at listening sessions that the Library Foundation had from, I really went back to the Envision Barrington event back in 2014. And then the Library Foundation in 2021, after the prior proposal failed, they went and actually, I guess they met with the ABC. I wasn't involved, so you have more of a memory of that than I would. And some other groups in town. And they found a pretty consistent request as to what they're looking for from a library. And the back in the Envision, they really saw the library as a meeting a lot of the needs that were identified in that Envision Barrington activity. And the same things kept coming up even when we did surveys as well as these listening sessions. People, besides books and media and that sort of thing, people are looking for socializing, connecting. They were looking for some community center where adult education and multi-generational events can occur. They continue to reflect a lack of space, and the library's outdated, way too small to meet these needs. There's not enough education about Barrington's history, and we tried to build that into our plans for a new library as well. More activities for seniors, and these things speak to not just the library's role, but what the recreation department is trying to accomplish as well. And I don't see us as overlapping. I see us as coordinating. And right now, I know Liz is working with Jesse on the teen program, teen leadership. And again, it's not overlapping, it's collaborating, building on our strengths in order to meet what people are in town have been saying over the years they were really looking for. The other thing we heard was the desire that the plans in the past were, the space was considered too large, it was too expensive. And so the library really took that to heart. And when we first were looking at the plan for this year for the building, we were looking at a 10,000 square foot building, significantly less than the 13,000 square feet that they were looking at before, but struggling with a 40% increase in construction costs since the last proposal. I just feel like, I don't know, there was an angel looking down or something, because the fact that this building became available, which is significantly smaller than the 10,000 square feet, but it's a building we feel we can make work, and particularly freeing up the old library space and rehabbing it. And I'm not involved in the details of that rehab, so you can rehab it for $300,000, you can rehab it for $3 million, soup to nuts, I suppose. But it allows both departments to be able to respond to what has been identified since 2014, if not before, as what the residents want. I think it's reflected in the, what are the letters? Capital, CIP, Capital Improvement Program, and reflected in the master plan as well. We hear these same messages over and over and trying to deliver that in a cost-effective way. So when we, I guess the one other comment I wanted to make that I didn't respond to in our responses, that someone had asked, is it possible for the library for regionalization? And that may be just one person's interest, but coincidentally, there were a couple of questions raised to the New Hampshire Library Trustee Association on that very topic. And so I got a little more information. That's very infrequently done, that a library, there are library consortia where each library has, each town has its own library, but they do some sort of a consortia thing so that members in all of those towns can borrow from all of those libraries in a more efficient way than going through interlibrary loan. That's not what I think was the question here. But when there is, it is by law allowable for a town to contract for library services with a neighboring town. And that's a negotiation between the towns and has to be approved at town meeting. Where that has happened is where there is a town of, I forgot to bring my notes with me, but the town of Sharon, which has a population of something under 500 people. And they contract, they used to contract, I think, with, I'm not going to remember, I'm not going to say where, they contract with the town of Jaffrey. Another one that raised the question is the town of Stark, population 300 something. I don't know, these are all under 500 and they can't support a library. They had one that's been defunct for years, a room in the town hall, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And the suggestion was maybe look at Groveton. And you can contract maybe with a town like that. It is the tiny, tiny towns. If they had a library, it's probably open 3 days a week, 2 hours a day, things like that. They're looking for full services. It's not a town of 10,000 square feet. Except for Dover and Rochester, we're larger than all those neighboring towns. And interestingly, Lee is renovating its library. Durham has a new library. Madbury has a new library. They're too small to accommodate anyone, even if we wanted to go that direction. It's more likely that we would have Stratford or somebody coming to us and asking to take advantage of our services. So that's a little history on others stuff.
Any other questions?
You had asked about linear square feet and
I know that
size.
you responded to that.
And I wasn't sure where you were going, but.
Well,
guess
I would,
wanted to-
if I wanted to, I could ask for more information about, okay, what are the usage volumes for each of these sections? To say, where is it, because you have mostly, you're saying it's the same space, which says, well, my circulation volume for those books in that category would also help us with, I'm sure that you've studied that, so.
Well, fortunately, Amy Inglis, who's a librarian, who's dealing with the collection mostly. And she really loves to analyze, as you probably remember from last year, she loves to get into the numbers and look at what's circulating, what's not, what people want.
The reason I asked, see what sections might be changing in activity that she was seeing or how much content she would have. So that was responded.
Yeah, okay.
All right, any other questions? Thank you for coming. You're very articulate.
Can we hang out and the public meeting? Or I can go back to the, I'll see you later anyway, for next meeting. Thanks, Liz.
One of the issues for linear square foot, couldn't linear shelf space is little change, but now you have to crawl on your knees, get the bottom two shelves. They have to be 6'2" to see the top shelf. And it's certainly not ADA.
Well, that's one issue. But my issue was with the actual utilization in each space was, and are we stocking some spaces larger than the traffic would bear, and which would say there's a lot of dead material on some of those spaces. So if I have a big stack of shelving with books in it, and I get 2 books a week from that space, then I have to say, hey, you could weed out. So that was where that.
Well, and
question-
that's where Amy is the weeding, the queen of weeding.
Yeah, it's something they want to do.
So that's why I.
Yeah.
It's,
And you have
it's
to
like
keep
I'm-
active. You notice that in Linda's notes, sort of phasing out reference, which seems terrible, but it's mostly online. We don't house encyclopedias anymore. Nobody wants encyclopedias.
Thank you. So now.
I'm sorry.
Visual now.
And so, Steve, I think, knowing what the goal is for today's meeting is important. So I just want to work backwards from a couple of things. So obviously, we're working towards preparing a warrant that will be presented to voters at deliberative session. The warrant, as it's presented to voters at deliberative session, will include recommendation votes from the Budget Committee and the Select Board.
Right.
That warrant is finalized at the public hearing that the Select Board will hold. Hopefully, it'll just be one of them, but on January 8th. And so what the Select Board is trying to do right now, and what they hope to do at their meeting on this coming Monday, is finalize the warrant going into that public hearing. So that public hearing, there could be changes, there could be updates, but that's the last opportunity to change anything ahead of deliberative session. So what we have done previously, and I would recommend that we do on the same schedule, is this part of the process for the Budget Committee is advising the Select Board recommended changes. Hey, you should change the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve from 300 to 50 and things like that. But the actual recommendation votes of this group last year took place the day after the public hearing. And I would recommend that the same thing happen. So nobody should be surprised on what articles there's a split vote from the Budget Committee or what articles the Budget Committee recommends or doesn't. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. Credit to Amy in the minutes and whatnot. So the preparing for taking a recommendation vote on January 9th, once everything is final, nothing's going to change again. And then the other thing is the priority order. So it was at this meeting last year that the Budget Committee recommended a priority order of warrant articles so that they were listed in the order that the Budget Committee felt were most important. And the exceptions to that were the operating budget, the bond, and forget what else, but that have zoning articles, which have to go at the beginning. Mostly it was just the capital reserve contributions that the Budget Committee prioritized. So I know we're going to go through the 6 articles and kind of finalize a perspective, a final opinion to the Select Board. But does that all make sense? This is.
End result of what we should be doing is to have recommendations that would help us either support or clarify
Right.
these remaining, because we've had votes on some of them, we haven't prioritized them yet.
Well, yeah, or not necessarily even like the votes weren't like recommendation votes. It was just, hey, there's nothing outstanding. We're comfortable. There's no concerns. And these were the 6 articles.
There were more, I think there were more consensus votes.
Yes.
That those articles were, given the language.
Right.
Would be approved. So
Yeah.
we would review the language and say, okay,
Exactly.
it meets what our minds were thinking at the time.
Right.
We got the consensus opinion about it.
Good deal.
So let's continue with our discussion on the have any of your positions changed, I guess, would be the question. Still, hey,
Yes.
Yes.
and I am still as written. My recommendation would be that we would like to see as another warrant or section of this that says, let's have a non-lapsing fund set up for services funded, to be funded for program services. And that the responsibility of the taxpayer is to provide community space. And we agree with that. That were done. I could, yes, to see what, if in fact, what came out at the envisioning session, which I attended. And I know the kinds of people that were at that envisioning section. section and their interests with the town. It did not include in that visioning session many of the naysayers in town, which I think are substantial. So what you get is a biased view when you look at the results and what we get from the consultants that put that thing together. That's another issue. But
Does this group want to make a recommendation about the changing the scope of the programming versus make space available? Is there more support other than Steve for making a recommendation like that to the select board?
I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at in terms of your additional motion or.
well, I think that it would be feasible for us to say comparable to what we do with the rec. There's certain levels of staff that are provided in terms of providing the space are justified. But other programs, unless, and like to pay a contractor or out of the taxpayers' money and not out of the library foundation's money or some other source is something that I think I have a real issue.
But wouldn't that have to be brought back to the town at some point if the library wanted to spend X amount of dollars on some sort of a program? Don't we still have the power of the purse to say no?
Well, I think that the content or the way I would word it is such that it's saying the taxpayers would set aside or create a fund that could be used for programs for adult skill treatment and all those other kinds of things that are not available in our community. And that should be left up to the taxpayers to say, here's another one. And what is it? It's maybe only $10,000 a year that would support those types of activities that are beneficial to certain people within the community, but that all taxpayers don't necessarily benefit from or need to fund. So, and I'm not saying that would be a big one, but that would be the test of the sentiment within the taxpayer base as to whether or not they feel that those are services that are programs that the library should provide.
Practically speaking, I mean, that would be something that would, if there were support for, would be almost like separating out a portion of the operating budget. So I don't know the number,
$5,000 about per year in the programming line.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, what the number is, I think, I don't know, I won't speak for you, Steve, but I think Steve would probably argue that it's more than $5,000, even though the actual programming number is $5,000. Is that part of the point that you're making?
Right, and it would also provide funding source so that you don't have an expert in town for some of those things that that people would benefit from.
But the point being is you're talking about separating a portion of the library operating budget where this is the portion that is the provision of library services and making space available. And then this separate portion, which is relative to
Would be another
programs and
account that would be
programming,
funded from other sources.
would be something that voters could separately decide on.
Right.
Is that kind of what you're saying? So they could still say yes.
Yes.
They could
Oh,
still
yeah.
say, yes, we want our tax money to go towards that.
Right.
But they'd have the more discrete decision. So I mean, that would be obviously very different than we've done. I guess the most important question in support of time is, are the other budget committee members here relative to the 2024 budget proposal interested in exploring that separation of the operating budget? If there is support, we'll spend the time talking about it. If there isn't support, maybe it's something we revisit in future years.
Speaking for me, I find that more of it's a management issue for the library, for the select board. I don't know that it's an issue for us. I think we're getting kind of down into the daily operations of what's going on, and I don't know if that's our total purview as it is
I don't,
the select board.
yeah, I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think it matters to the extent that it sounds like Steve's opinion on the proposed library depends on this. So I mean, I think it's worth talking about only to that extent, but the practicality of doing that, I think you're exactly right. If this group recommended that there should be a separation, it would be the select board and the library trustees that would work out how exactly that would happen, not necessarily this group. But if this group isn't going to recommend that that even be explored, then, you know,
I almost wonder if that's the way to go, whether it's really, we have to have some level of trust among our government and, maybe what we can say is this is what we would like them to do. And we probably can't solve that problem today, but maybe that can become part of our official budget review of the library going forward to say, how are you doing this, and continue to fine tune and have that discussion as we go
Well,
forward.
I'm not sure that's the role of the ABC, because then we say, which one of those programs do we agree belongs in that scope and which ones don't? That's not our role. Our role is to set the structure so that it can be controlled based on who is benefiting from those programs. And how does the town in general benefit from those programs?
And some of those programs don't go and necessarily tie back into to what a library is as a library. You're talking as a community center, which is a different animal. Just because the library may have a dozen books on basketball doesn't mean that you should be playing basketball in the library. So, the same thing, similar with yoga. That to go and pick out a program that's already in.
So I go back to the original concept that when these whole things were coming together, there was going to be a community center, the town hall and a library, meeting spaces within the town hall, everything else, and it was all laid out so that the town hall became the community center, not the library. Well, that didn't happen. So now we're in a situation where we have the town hall. We still need meeting space for the town as a community center. And should the library agree that, and I would say from the provision of space for a community center, yes, to actually provide resources, to provide the content resources. That's where I have my issue, because I don't see it benefiting the total town. There are people that are specific to it, and much like the rec, it's the people that have benefit and have kids that need to be educated, or things they do during the summer, and people pay for those things. And that's, they fund that out of those activities. So I'm saying, if that's what the way we could structure, and you could structure it that way. That's what many nonprofits do. So, then that would give them a meeting space. So we could say, okay, if I go out to UNH, they have master gardener plant classes, and they'll teach you how to prune trees, and they'll do all those kinds of things on a contributory basis.
Yeah.
And, something similar to that could be done in our library for the community center component.
Yeah, but that portion doesn't come on, that portion, as I go and I understand it, is not going to come under the portion of the RSA where the tax base has to go and pay for it. So that you.
The RSA says it has to be free. Is it true? If you look at the RSA, it says education services and learning. It's broadly defined the way that people are interpreting that RSA have to be free. And that's what the RSA says. It has to be free to the citizens.
Right.
So the question is, what is the definition of that scope? And that's where I get real fuzzy. And then I just know that we're going to meet a lot of resistance out there. Because there's always been people who say, well, community center, no, I don't need it because I don't use that kind of services. So there's that many people in our population, and we're an aging population that may not need those kinds of.
But it's almost by the same definition, if you have a road that you don't drive on, you want to say, well, I don't want to pay for the tarring of that road because I don't drive on that road. I only drive on these 3 roads in town, and I could care less about any other road.
Again, I look at it that is infrastructure, which is a town responsibility.
Mhm.
Meeting space and community space is town's responsibility. Now, driving on it or providing a road, a taxi that goes down there, or actually taking people down that road, that's not our responsibility. It's not the town's responsibility. You have a lot of volunteer organizations do that. Meals on Wheels is another one. That's something that people use those roads in, but that's a volunteer service. It's a nonprofit organization that relies on donations from people who want to help those kinds of people out. The same thing conceptually.
I think-
Just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say the library,
Excuse me, this is our rate.
okay, sorry.
So I mean, nothing is changing votes, so we still have one no, yes. Yes. You're a yes?
Yeah, sure.
And a yes. And I'm still, as it's currently structured, where we're gonna, and I still haven't talked about how we're gonna deal with rec department configuration there. But I'm still a no.
And obviously, the additional information that we don't have now, which you will have when you make your recommendation votes, which will appear at deliberative session, will be the bond number, the structure of the, the donations that are cash on hand available at the time. I actually learned that recently that we might not know about the humanities grant in time for the warrant finalization of the warrant article, because they're not awarding those funds until the federal budget is finalized, and obviously we're in continuing resolution, so that may be delayed. It could be beyond the March vote, but just an update there. So that there will be more information, but based on the information that's available now, 3-2 in support of the library proposal. You'll go to community center next?
Okay.
Okay. So the select board. Steve was there, I guess, at the beginning, and Scott, I know you were online. So the select board didn't really do anything with the budget committee's recommendations. They didn't say, yes, we think those are good recommendations, but they also didn't object to anything, except maybe the level of the cost of living adjustment. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the select board is comfortable with taking the 500,000 out. I told them that that was this group's recommendation, supported by me, supported by the recreation director. So I don't see any reason why they would have to put it in. Dannon, you think I've read the room okay?
Yeah, I would go a little even stronger.
Okay.
I think the select board went along with all of the recommendations.
Okay.
Be concerned about the library, but the ones that the committees and the 500 out,
Right.
I think was pretty much a consensus.
It was like passive agreement. They didn't want to take a vote, which is understandable. They wanted to wait till it was a 5-member board and the chair was back. So with that in mind, let's assume that it's a $1,150,000 article with $1 million to come from a grant and 150 to come from the revolving fund as the required 15% match, which is what the group said we would support it if that's what it was, but assume that that's what it is.
Now, sometimes when you see that, you write contingency language in there
Right.
that says if the grant is.
Nothing
Then
happens.
nothing happens.
Nothing happens. Right.
And go around the table. Mike? Okay. Yes, unanimous approval with that contingency.
So the other one that we put on the to the side was the TIF district. And the select board doesn't want a recommendation from this group on the TIF district. Is that your perspective, Dannon?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they made clear. So I think I don't think their mind's gonna change. I don't think it's unanimous perspective of the select board. But I don't think that the town center, the second iteration of the town center TIF district will include a recommendation for vote from the budget committee. That said, love to have your all input, but let's not do that now. Because we don't need to do anything unnecessarily. So I think we'll just skip that one. If we're not gonna take a recommendation to vote on.
Well, does the board agree that our scope is anything that has a tax rate impact
And that one doesn't.
until the future?
Well, it does not have a direct tax rate impact. It captures,
If they issue bonds and can't recoup the costs?
well, they're not issuing bonds.
Well.
There's not a proposal to issue bonds. The purchase of the property, what they authorized me to do was pursue a purchase and sale which purchases the property basically with installment payments as cash is available.
As
So-
cash is available.
So no,
So if it doesn't
No
bring in
bond,
the
no debt.
revenue to the tax rate,
then the town wouldn't buy it.
no, I mean, that, if as funds are available,
But
where are
it's-
those funds coming?
Right, if you have cash come in.
Yeah.
That could end up being
Right.
unbalanced,
Listen,
which
no,
could
I
be used to be
understand the
buy down the
perspective.
tax rate. I don't care if it's 1/8 of a cent.
Mhm.
That has a tax rate impact, which we agreed is part of our scope as the budget committee.
To select, yeah, I don't disagree. My
But-
personal opinion is that it's appropriate for the budget committee, just as they did last year, to have a recommendation vote on the TIF district. The select board doesn't share that perspective.
So, I mean,
I don't know, I mean, Dan, and I don't know if you can elaborate any more than I can.
No,
We tried.
yeah.
The terms were that scope creep and. Yeah, I don't know.
Can I make a motion that the ABC provide a recommendation?
It's a
Regardless
select
of the
board's
select
decision.
board,
Well, it's-
well, it can be in our meeting minutes though, right? It doesn't have
Yes,
to
you
go on,
can.
doesn't have to go on a piece of paper, but public minutes, the chair is here.
Yep.
So move.
That there's your perspective that the budget committee should vote on, provide a recommendation on the TIF district. A warrant
Yes,
article.
unless the select board can prove that it has 100% zero impact on the tax rate.
Yep.
Then it falls under our scope.
And that should go in the minutes, and then the select board can say no.
Can consider. Right, that's perfectly appropriate. Is there a second?
Is there a second to his motion?
I will second that.
All right,
Well,
John?
I obviously had to vote yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Michael?
Fine.
that might change their mind. I mean, we tried. The other big one, which there aren't any anyway, so it doesn't matter, but the exemptions and credits. The select board felt like that was scope creep for the budget committee to vote on, provide a recommendation for exemption and credit changes. Very clearly also has a tax rate impact. But anyways, so we will take that to them and maybe we'll have reason to talk about it again on the meeting on the 12th. All right.
But it's also something that should carry over if we continue on next year, trying to refine who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
I would remind you that the ABC is actually a creature of select.
We understand.
So Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve, the select board expressed no objection to reducing it to 50,000. So I think your vote here would be assuming that it's a 50,000, not a $300,000 warrant article.
That's correct.
John,
Yes.
Michael? 50,000 Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve contribution.
Yes.
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 Richardson Pond Dam. So I think it's reasonable. No, wait, no. How about this will be the fastest one yet? I think it's reasonable to assume that the select board will be, will support pulling anything to do with Richardson Pond off the 2024 warrant. The information I have from DES is that they are okay with that. To your all's credit, I took some of the conversation that we had and asked maybe the same question in a different way. You know how sometimes you can do that. We have a new engineer from the Dam Bureau. And on the phone, she said, oh yeah, that's a creative idea. Maybe that'll work. Basically, I said, can we make it non-jurisdictional with the minimum amount of work and then just leave it? And if it fails, it fails. So that, maybe that wouldn't be so bad, basically, is how the conversation went on the phone. And then she said she's gonna run up the flagpole. So I got an email today, and you look at an email, like you don't read anything and you just know what it says. So this email was like a page and a half long.
Oh, you can't let it fail.
Needless to say, it didn't say, no, I put it up the flagpole and they were okay with that. She was citing RSAs that say how it's a, criminal offense to have a dam that you're planning to fail and, all the rest of the stuff. So,
Oh, what's the orange jumpsuit on? Question.
yeah, not me. So they, the two good parts of the very long email were she's comfortable with our progress and knows that political decisions take time. So there's no pressure from DES that we're making a decision and anything's happening at town meeting this year. The second part that's pretty promising is in the weeds of her telling us that, no, we can't just leave it and let it fail. I think it's more reasonable that there is a smaller scope of reconstruction that could, after we make it non-jurisdictional, now we're meeting fewer criteria. We still can't have a dam that we expect to fail, so we might have to make some improvements to it, but a smaller scope. So we'll get with the engineers and work on that. I think it's reasonable to assume the select board will support not doing anything in 2024 and waiting until we make a decision about what we're gonna do, then in the proper order, decide how to pay for it. Gannon? Accurate representation?
Yeah.
So maybe there's nothing to vote on.
So can we just talk about in perpetuity? A plan to fix it and then wait for it to fail during that time, as long as we have a plan.
As long as the dam bureau engineers continue to turn over, I could probably use that excuse, every couple of years. Although I hope this one stays, she's great. She came from the private sector, and so she looks at things completely different. And I don't mean different like it's always in a good way, but I think she understands. Okay, so we're gonna skip that one. Okay, and then the last one was the highway and transfer station union, which we have our last negotiation on Thursday. And so we don't have those details. I expect the cost items to total in the tens of thousands of dollars, maybe somewhere between 20 and 40 or 50. And so that's the scale that we're talking about. Obviously I'll have it broken out like I have previously with the police union contract. The majority of that is the wage increase that that the budget is providing to other employees, but now it's a negotiated item subject to approving the cost items of contract. So that's the lion's share of it.
When you have those details, you can make that comparison.
Exactly.
And then we can see, yes, it's only $10,000 or to the budget and the bottom line. But
Right. So yeah, we'll have those details. I'll copy you on the information when I send it up to the select board, once we have a tentative agreement. And then, so you'll have it plenty in advance of a conversation on the 9th. But the budget committee, I guess the budget committee's involvement won't change
no,
those
it
terms.
becomes a legal requirement.
It
So,
is, exactly.
Who from the board is negotiating?
I'm present.
It's a team effort. It has gone remarkably well.
Right, I mean, that will be the select board approves and.
Yeah, and the budget committee will either vote to recommend it or not, is the point being. And so that vote can happen on the 9th of January.
Well, it's good, we can have a vote on this one and let they allow us to.
Give us our opinion.
So offended.
I can work to change that if I can make a money and.
Yeah, honestly, a unanimous vote from the budget committee that we should vote on this. 4 of the 5 members will probably, that'll be enough for probably 4 of the 5.
Yeah, with Tracy.
I didn't say who the one member was.
You never know.
Okay.
It's on video, right?
Okay, great. Do you want to prioritize the capital reserve contributions now?
Last year we had
Do you want to start with that order?
top, was there top, bottom, and top, middle, and bottom?
Yeah, there's 3 categories.
Everything that's unanimous essentially goes to the top, right?
Well, you'd still have to order them in between there. Let me pull up the 2023 warrant. And we'll just start from that prioritization and you can make changes. So you at least have a baseline to start from. Reasonable?
Yeah.
And I'll put this up on the screen once I get it. These meetings go so long, I have to turn my brightness down so that my battery lasts long enough. I don't have to plug it in, so I can't see anything.
You're just getting old and your eyes are going bad.
Just terrible. That happens too.
It's all cataract surgery.
Okay, can you see? Yes, you can see. Make it a little bigger.
Yeah, I noticed Bill didn't go and bring his computer today, so he didn't have to plug it in.
No, not today.
For the people in the back. Okay, so we're going to get to the table of contents. We can probably just do it from here. So Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve was number 1. we'll probably be moving that one from the top slot because we reduced it to 50,000. So maybe we'll put that in pending for a second. Highway heavy equipment was number 2. Is that the new number 1? This is the $300,000 shot in the arm to make sure we can meet our equipment replacement schedule.
Yes.
I guess, I mean, any of the equipment, any of the fire trucks, ambulances, heavy equipment, I mean, they're all,
Yep.
They're right.
they're all 1A through F or whatever number they are to me.
So fire truck's the next one, so we're thinking that's number 2.
Right.
Dam repair engineering was would be the next one. This is the $200,000 contribution, which allows us to make the gate box repairs this year. We'll ask for another $200,000 next year, which will allow us to do the riprap filter, and then we should be good for capital projects for a little while. Is that one number 3, are we thinking? Okay. Police equipment capital reserve, this has fluctuated a couple years in a row. We think 50,000 is the number. Hopefully it'll be able to stay at 50,000 for a while. Are we thinking that's the next one? We can move. I'm just making the list and then we'll see which ones we skip. So next was the emergency communication upgrades. Transfer station recycling center.
This one is now defined as paving.
As paving. Yeah, this is paving.
That's okay.
Next, we're gonna skip this one. That one's not on there. Energy capital reserve wasn't reintroduced. Library technology capital reserve. So let's look. Let me now pull up the list. Where's gonna be the easiest place to pull it from? To see which ones we missed. We have the paving article. It is that list, but it's changed. I have an updated copy. I don't know if it's in here. It was in warrant articles. No. But I think I have it. I can just open the PDF. So in that list, where do we want to put paving? The $150,000 for additional paving?
It's right, my opinion would be right after fire trucks and dump trucks.
It's gotta be.
After the fire truck, so that would be number 3.
Definitely above the transfer station.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Well.
Pull up this Word document. Make it a little bigger for you. Okay, scrolling down. Those 2 will be bond articles. We'll have the operating budget, highway heavy equipment. Oh, Old Settlers Bridge. This is the $220,000 match. You want to put that below the dam, ahead of the police. And you're kind of coupled with infrastructure.
They're so equal in terms.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
That's time.
You know, looking ahead to our December 12th meeting, one of the things that I think would be productive to do is for the groups to identify those needs and those wants. And so that residents can really see the category of things that, okay, we recognize that you might have to make some choices. We'd like you to make choices from this pot. And so, you know, these priorities, we can identify these as needs. You know, obviously that's a subjective decision, but, okay, public safety building design and impact fee study. Do we put that after Old Settlers Bridge before police with the rest of the infrastructure?
That's the least important stuff, less important in my mind.
Yeah, less important than the Old Settlers Bridge, but maybe more important than the police equipment capital reserve? Or do you think even less important than
Less
that?
than police, life safety is
Right.
top of my list.
So communication was the next one, maybe below that, but ahead of transfer?
Yes.
Yes.
Good consensus there? Okay. PSB, paving, we added that one. Richardson Pond, glad not to have to talk about that anymore. Bridge and culvert, So yeah, where do we want to put the 50,000? Do we want to put it after Old Settlers, before police? Or even lower?
I am below. I think it should go up just because it's. We gotta keep it front and center. It is something that we have.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, if that fails, that money would just be rolled into the bond anyway, right?
Mhm.
So either way we're paying for it, I'd rather have the police equipment and all that funded before
Yes.
this, which we're gonna end up bonding anyway.
Yes.
So put the emergency communications after the police equipment.
Yep. So do you think the 50,000 for bridge and culvert would go before or after the transfer station? Before, maybe higher priority?
Before.
Okay, so it'll come in right after the public safety building. So we'll say bridge and culvert. Police equipment, transfer station, fire rescue equipment, we missed that one. That was my bad. Probably next to police,
Yes.
right after
I mean,
police.
it's the amount there just becomes an automatic checkbox anyway,
Right.
is my theory.
How John Morris votes. I didn't know you had an automatic checkbox.
It's based on the number of commas in the amount requested. Anything,
999,000 has the same commas as.
if you can build it for $9.99, then you go, I can check the box. You got that extra comment.
You're gonna love the purchase price and negotiating for the 13 acres.
No, I'm not. I can't comment on that. It's part of the TIF district, right? I've been censored
No,
by
but that's why
Tracy.
I invited you to the TIP district subcommittee, so you can still have a voice.
Yeah, I need to see the other invites of that too.
You need to see them?
Yeah.
You will be happy. You will be in good company. I will not be, but you will be in good company. Okay, that's all of them, right? So collective bargaining, close the trust funds, transfer station, recycling center revolving fund, fire ambulance revolving fund. Sweet. So to go over highway heavy equipment, fire truck, paving, dams, Old Settlers, police equipment, fire rescue equipment, emergency communications, public safety building, bridge and culvert, transfer station, library technology. Consensus on that? Perfect.
And knowing that we will review that when we finalize some.
Right. Okay. Did we do everything we needed to?
So,
Is there an next order of business?
I don't think so.
What time is it?
Motion to adjourn.
What are we doing on next?
But let's actually talk really quick about next Tuesday, because I want, this has the potential to be really helpful, mostly to the voters, but specifically to me. Because I think what we all have recognized is that we have a lot going on, and we have a heavy burden of an education campaign to make sure we have informed voters, which is the number one goal. But we have we have some time to do that, and we have people who are involved. This group has had some really good ideas. The ideas of creating some narratives for the warrant articles, specifically from the budget committee, that have, this is the consensus opinion, or for those articles that there's a dissenting opinion, this is the prevailing opinion, this is the dissenting opinion, so that residents can see without sifting through minutes, why did 2 budget committee members vote that they didn't want the library community center project or the library project? It could be that they read that Steve Saunders said he doesn't want programs, and they say, well, I don't care about that. So maybe that's a 4-1 to my perspective. Or they read that John Morris thinks that there are other priorities in town, and they say, okay, well, I know there's other priorities, but I still want to support this. Or maybe they say, what are the other priorities? Go look into that. And so that's a really good idea. Those are the type of ideas that I hope we can cultivate at the December 12th meeting, and assign homework essentially for the groups, whether it be the select board or the budget committee, to work on those components, whatever we decide is important. One of the other things we talked about is showing up to the primary election vote in January 23rd, and being available for residents there, being available to talk about our recommendation, your recommendations, be available to talk about the initiatives that the town's pursuing. I had a long conversation with the fire chief today, who he made a really good point, and I share this perspective. It's our duty to make sure that residents understand not just what we're giving them for options this year, but what they can expect from us in the next few years. And I know Scott has mentioned this on numerous occasions throughout the process. And, I told him, I said, if you can only say one thing to a resident, right? If you're prioritizing, the first thing you're going to say to a resident isn't, yes, we're asking for this much this year, we're asking for 3 million more next year, we're asking for 10 million more the next year, we're asking for 10 million more the next year. That's not the first thing that you're going to say. You're going to say, these are the needs that we have this year, and these are why those needs are important. And we have needs coming up, so maybe the second, third, fourth, or fifth thing you say is the bigger picture. But we need to refine that messaging to make sure that residents are making decisions eyes wide open. So between now and the 12th, be thinking about that for yourself, for the residents that you interact with. What are the tools that we can use? How can we do that? And so that brainstorming session, which is really what it's going to be on the 12th, we can put together a really good plan, communication plan for the different initiatives that we're pursuing, and how not only the select board, but also the budget committee can be involved in the process between now and March. Fair enough?
Which time's next week? Same bad time.
4:30.
4:30. Is it 4? No, it's 4:30. The meeting I set for the TIF districts.
When you sucker me into it's 4, yeah.
So thank you for.
It'll be in there.
Yes.
Yeah, voluntold.
Yeah. Well, I've only gotten one application for appointment, so this is gonna be like an ad hoc town administrator advisory committee for at least the first session. A lot of the responses were, I'm willing to come listen, and I said, okay, well, that's good enough for now, so.
What's this, the TIF stuff?
Yeah, this is about the TIF district and the plan for
I
that.
may be late next week in Massachusetts, and I'll be coming back that afternoon, so I'll try to get there, but being 495,
Good time of day, too.
it's like Charlie, the MTA. It's still the out there.
There you go. You participate the way Shannon did when he was in California.
On his road trip.
On his road trip, yeah, he came in by phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen in.
Yeah, remember we had a little triangle that we used?
Yeah.
We took baby steps in the technology world. Look at us now.
Yeah, that was in the cheaper building too.
Was it cheaper? I don't know if it was cheaper.
No,
But it's hard to tell from about.
if there's a
line
link for
items.
that meeting, could you send that to me so that if I can't get here, I'll join from the road.
Deal.
Try.
Yeah.
Participate.
Wherever you were in Rhode Island, wherever you were at the last joint meeting, hey, listen. Yeah, we got a lot done.
So,
Cell or Wi-Fi.
Deal. Okay, are we adjourned? Okay, 5:41.
Where is everyone?
all right, what is it?